The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. Full story explained. Introduction. Some stories entertain us, some make us think. And then there are stories that quietly change the way we see ourselves. Published in 1915, The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka is one of the most influential novellas ever written. It isn't simply the story of a man who wakes up as a giant insect. It is a story about sacrifice, loneliness, family, identity, and what happens when people stop seeing your value. Kafka never tells us why the transformation happens. Instead, he asks a much deeper question. If the people you love could no longer benefit from you, would they still love you the same way? This is the unforgettable story of Gregor Samsa. The story. Gregor Samsa was a hardworking traveling salesman who spent every day supporting his parents and his younger sister, Greta. His job was exhausting, but he accepted it because his family depended entirely on him. He dreamed that one day he would earn enough money to send Greta to music school and give her the future she deserved. Then, one ordinary morning, everything changed. Gregor woke up to discover that he had transformed into a gigantic insect. His body was covered with a hard shell, his legs were thin and uncontrollable, and every movement felt strange. At first, he couldn't believe what had happened. Surprisingly, his greatest concern wasn't becoming a monster. It was being late for work. Outside his room, his mother, father, and sister became worried because Gregor wasn't answering the door. Soon, the chief clerk from his company arrived to investigate why such a reliable employee had failed to show up. Gregor desperately tried to explain himself, but only strange sounds came from his mouth. After a painful struggle, he finally unlocked the door. The moment his family saw him, terror filled the apartment. His mother fainted, the chief clerk fled in horror, and his father forced Gregor back into his room using a walking stick. From that moment, Gregor became a prisoner inside his own home. As the days passed, he slowly adapted to his new body. He no longer enjoyed fresh food and instead preferred rotten leftovers. His room became the only world he knew. Only his sister, Greta, continued to care for him. She quietly brought him food every day and cleaned his room, even though she was frightened by what her brother had become. Without Gregor's income, the family was forced to work again. His father found a job, his mother began sewing, and Greta started working in a shop. Little by little, they learned to live without Gregor. As weeks turned into months, Greta decided to remove the furniture from Gregor's room so he would have more space to crawl. But Gregor desperately tried to protect a framed picture hanging on the wall because it reminded him of the human life he had lost. When his mother saw him climbing across the wall, she fainted in fear. His father rushed into the room and, overcome with anger, began throwing apples at Gregor. One apple became lodged deep inside his back, causing a wound that never healed. From that day on, Gregor grew weaker. The family's financial situation became even worse, so they rented part of their apartment to 3 strict lodgers. Gregor was hidden away like a shameful secret. One evening, Greta played her violin for the guests. The beautiful music touched Gregor deeply. Forgetting his appearance for a moment, he slowly crawled into the living room, hoping to hear his sister play a little longer. But the lodgers were horrified. They demanded to leave the apartment immediately. That night, Greta finally admitted what everyone else had already begun to believe. She told her parents that the creature was no longer Gregor and that they had to get rid of it. Those words broke Gregor's heart. He quietly returned to his room without making a sound. Alone in the darkness, Gregor reflected on his life. He remembered every sacrifice he had made for his family and realized they would never accept him again. Weak from hunger and the wound in his back, he stopped fighting. Before sunrise, Gregor died peacefully in his room. The next morning, the cleaning woman found his body. When the family learned he was gone, they didn't cry. Instead, they felt relief. The burden that had weighed on their lives for months had finally disappeared. They dismissed the lodgers, left the apartment together, and spent the day traveling through the countryside. For the first time in many months, they spoke hopefully about the future. They noticed that Greta had grown into a confident young woman with a life waiting ahead of her. Life, at last, could begin again. Ending. More than 100 years after its publication, the Metamorphosis continues to move readers around the world. Kafka reminds us that a person's value should never depend only on what they can provide. Gregor's greatest tragedy wasn't becoming an insect. It was remaining human inside while everyone else stopped seeing the human being he had always been. Perhaps the real transformation didn't happen to Gregor at all. Perhaps it happened to the people around him. If this timeless story made you think, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more classic stories and unforgettable literature.